Hey there, folks. Chris McLean back with yet another episode. And today in the studio, I've got Sharon from Into the Blue agency. And they're a full-service agency focused on the balance of results and creative. And without results, they're simply ineffective, especially in today's business climate. And Sharon believes in win-win as well as the relationships and collaborations that they forge on their behalf with the press, influencers, their community, and their verticals. And Sharon takes her clients through a 15-step process to be discovered, generate broader awareness, generate reviews, build loyalty, and initiate effective referral marketing in both the tangible and the digital world. Sharon, sounds super exciting. Thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So take us through Into the Blue. How did Into the Blue come about for you?
The early years of my career were actually in the media world. I started working in radio, television, moved on to newspaper, magazine. And in the 90s, that was the media that you had available. It was a pretty basic mix. There were fax machines and so forth. I'm dating myself. However, it has evolved over the years. And with that, my background is in marketing. I worked in media on the business side of things and evolved more into the marketing side as my career went on. With that, I had many clients that were asking me to become their agency. And so I moved on to the other side of the desk, and that actually was in the early 2000s.
Yeah, right.
For a little while, I took a hiatus and took the desk to be the national marketing director of one of the largest sports nutrition distributors in the country.
Yeah, wow.
I had tremendous success there, and then came back to the agency world when they sold successfully, and we're 5 years into the Blue. Very successfully, even after the pandemic, thank goodness.
Yeah, amazing. So why Into the Blue? Is it blue sky thinking, big dreams? What was the rationale behind the name?
Well, it's a little bit of a funny story. It actually originally was Out of the Blue, which is our legal name. And right. Even though I did a lot of research, I discovered there was another agency about 100 miles away with the same name. So we did a subtle name change. And I wanted something that, generated questions. It's my favorite color. It's a color of trust and calm. Mm-hmm. And really, we like marketing that's embracing and draws you in. So there's a lot of subtle subliminal messaging behind the name.
Nice. Love it. So when you help clients, you say you're very much about having that balance of also beauty, right? Creativity. So how do you find and how do you mesh that together for your clients?
Well, it goes back to being on the business side of things and also being a business owner. Over the years, I've worked with agencies, and I was a partner on an agency prior. And with that, there was such a heavy emphasis on the creative, which was spectacular. And there needed to be an equal emphasis on the strategy to really make sure that we were driving business. And unless you are fueling that bottom line, you're not going to be able to maintain your relationship, and you can't grow your agency if your foundation is always crumbling. So with that, when I was on the media side of the desk, I was one of the top sales, account executives in the organization, if not the top. I was able to work with a lot of different industries and understand their perspective, what they needed to be successful. And with that, I absorbed that. I also, working for John Hoffman at Lone Star, which was a sports new distributor, I was able to see that by not being selfish, by being generous with your time and attention and really immersing yourself in the businesses that you work with and the individuals that you work for, and really learning what their needs are and creating unique strategies in their space, that you really, by having that focus on a win-win relationship, you're able to maintain the business relationships that you have because you have their best interests in heart. I know If I was any other type of business and needed to hire an agency, that is exactly the mindset that I would look for in a partner, because an agency is meant to be an extension. It's meant to be a partner.
Yeah, and that win-win speaks to kind of genuinely having of your clients in heart and in mind when you're working for them. And like I was saying, it's super important to have that balance of, we're not just going to make beautiful assets for you, they're actually going to generate some money in your business, actually going to get you some tangible results. So yeah, it's really important to find that balance. And how are you finding what are the sort of, I guess, the mechanisms that you're using to do that in today's world, obviously coming from fax machines and the sort of older school traditional side, now that everything is sort of hyper digitized? How are you sort of translating native results through? Is it sort of through Facebook? Is it particular ads? Are you looking more holistically and sort of omni-channel? What's your sort of perspective on how you tactically kind of start to merge that creativity into business results?
Every industry is different. We have clients. One area that we specialize heavily in is fitness and wellness. However, we have clients that specialize in drug and rehab, recovery to real estate. It really runs the gamut.
Yeah, right.
So again, fortunately, I have that background in media, so I have that front hand exposure working with a lot of different industries, and I have an absolutely amazing team. I have veterans on my team that are from, a couple decades in their career to about 5 years in their career, and I think it's very important to have that perspective of all of those different age groups, especially with smartphones and technology today, and we're always obviously trying to cater to the 50, 60, 70-year-old market consumer as well. So every industry is completely different. So it's looking at who's your target consumer or group of consumers, what type of media they use, how they live their day-to-day. For example, in social media, if you were to sit there with someone who's in their 50s or 60s to see how they view social media, because they really absorb every single post, take the time to really read it. They move much more slowly.
Yeah, right.
If you sit on the other side, I have a 19 and a 20-year-old daughters, and it's amazing how fast they can text and how quickly they move from app to app and post to post. It's incredible. So I don't even know how they retain any information.
Yeah, they don't. I think it's a really interesting distinction. It's an interesting point that you make of just the speed of consumption of information through just a different demographic or different stage of life, and that 50, 60, you sort of, this is very, very new, whereas 19, 20-year-olds and younger, they're born into this, right? They're bred into this sort of digital world, and it's all very native and natural. So I think that's actually really interesting. Is that one of the benefits you find in having that diversity sort of in the workforce, in your team, that you can really understand the different populations of users?
Absolutely. My team, we're international cultures, men and women. We're in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so definitely we all bring a different perspective to the table. When I went to college, I took studies, African American studies, women's studies. I lived in South America. It's very important to look at how different cultures, different sexes, different age groups, and so forth, look at media, how they consume messages, the importance of communication, the style of communication. And so, when we are onboarding clients, we are looking at them with information in front of us. We're having other team members look objectively without any information provided to see what they absorb and can interpret. And then we also reach out to a lot of different people in the community of different age groups and cultures as well, to get some independent perspective, so that we are, I like to look at everything from a lot of different perspectives. I think that's an area that I specialize in, is trying to almost take your eyes out of your head and look at things from the other side.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really interesting. Very a really good insight. As you said, you're trying to target a whole range of people. So if you've got a whole range of people inside your business kind of doing that targeting and trying to understand, that can be a nice balance to have, to be able to understand, right, how does a 50-year-old person read a tweet versus how does a 19-year-old sort of engage with a TikTok video and all that kind of stuff. There's I mean,
exactly.
What do you find are the differences and distinctions between, because you're sort of very much into this sort of engagement with different age groups, what do you find are sort of key distinctions other than sort of the time it takes to consume content? Are there, just sort of interested to sort of probe into that a little bit of what really are the differences across sort of the age? Do younger people sort of engage with longer form copy, or do they just not really engage? They don't have that depth of attention to engage with a newspaper article or a press release, whereas an older person might. So what are the sort of the underlying biology, I guess, of those, the 19-year-old versus a 60-year-old?
Right. Well, the interesting thing is we answer that question differently now than we did a year ago. The older, every market or every segment of the population has a varying degree of familiarity with technology. And so the senior population was somewhat forced to learn a lot more about online. And so, so it's been really interesting. We actually stopped watching the clock throughout the pandemic when we were working with our clients, because there was a lot of testing that we had to apply to see what, obviously consumers were afraid. They were afraid to step outside, even in wide open air and so forth. They were afraid now, to re-enter society. I mean, Florida kind of opened everything up a little bit faster than many other places in America, which is good for our business. However, nothing's perfect. But so getting back to your question is, seniors, they use I don't want to say seniors, people in their 50s or 60s, even 70s. My father, who's in his 80s, are social media a little bit, definitely resorting more to online than they did before. They've learned how to comfortably order food through delivery dudes, to Grubhub and other apps. And where there was mistrust before, they have more trust because they are somewhat forced to rely on it. So there's definitely, there's always been some skepticism of social media and online media amongst the older market, where there's almost unsafe amount of trust with the younger segment. And so it's always trying to, also, we use a different voice and a different length in what we are communicating with the different audiences as well. Obviously, a Facebook and a Twitter consumer and user is going to be, a skew older than, TikTok or Snapchat. And yes, I'm in all of them.
That's it. Really good insight is that, that trust and that willingness to sort of use that older generation have sort of been forced into ordering food online and ordering groceries and just to survive, really to survive.
Right.
Had banking,
and to even fight loneliness.
Their hands forced towards online banking, and just to avoid loneliness, to get on Zoom and work out how all that stuff works, just to connect with people. They've had to do that stuff, and that's interesting. That trust, right? That willingness to pull out a credit card, that may not have happened as quickly had the last 18 months or so not happened. Whether now because they're forced and they've tried it out and they've gone, okay, well, it's actually quite safe. They're now willing to pull out the credit card and do online shopping and do online transactions.
And now we're on the flip side, and we don't want them to click on certain links in some of these phishing emails, unfortunately.
Very true. Very true. My mum gets those all the time. Don't know how she gets targeted, but it's I
do too.
Once you sort of, it's a bit like Pandora's box, I guess, isn't it? Once you're in, and you've got to get yourself educated pretty quickly as to what's safe and what's not, and what to trust. So,
absolutely.
I can imagine it's been a pretty interesting last couple of years for people that have been forced, the sort of laggards, I guess, right? You've been forced into these digital ecosystems, and you sort of almost had to learn again, right? Learn how to live and communicate and connect
Absolutely.
and utilize and all this kind of stuff.
And it became very congested online too, because everybody has the herd mentality. So at that point, it was rather heartbreaking, actually, because, for example, when we were in the middle of the shutdown in Florida, I still about once a week would go into my office. I thought, well, nobody else is out. How could I possibly get COVID? Which thankfully I did not. And I went to the Greek restaurant, and they were literally in tears, where they were busy all the time. They had no means to be able to reach out to anyone to let them know that they were open for takeout. They had a social following of about 50 people, and they were posting things on there. I said, maybe 5 people are seeing it. They, as busy as they were every day before the pandemic, they never did anything to collect all the names of their customers so that they could market to them afterwards. So I definitely dedicated a lot of free time, as well as my team, which I was really proud and appreciative of, to try to educate people and really help, bring them out and help their businesses rebuild. We even had a client donate $100,000 for a grant program to be divided up by 15 different businesses, which we actually just announced the winners last week. So, so those are some of the things that we try to do as, in partnership with our clients to really, I think we all learned that we have to work together instead of against each other more.
Yeah, collaboration's been a major thing that's come out of this this time as well. And as you say, because you're coming into this with a win-win outcome in mind, it predicates the fact that you see somebody in trouble, you say, look, how can I help you? How can I step in? And that's definitely not a unique story. The mom and pop store, or the mom and pop store, as you say over in your part of the world, that have gone under because they've had an amazing, thriving business, but they never took down an email address. They never took down a name. They don't have a list of the people that come in, and suddenly from busy, they now have no audiences. And it's literally adapt or die out there, right, in the last 18 months. And you've had to either work out how to maintain a business when you've just got takeaway, all this kind of stuff. It's been a pretty, thoroughly interesting from a marketing and comms and business standpoint, but also on the flip side, it can be a pretty horrendous experience if you're just not prepared.
Remarkably, we actually broke the records of 5 different clients in their all-time sales or their all-time leads and web traffic last year, from real estate, where they had, obviously some of the rebound is for obvious reasons, but both commercial and residential, they've had the highest amount of web traffic and the fastest turnaround ever in their 30 to 40 year history. We had a fresh Christmas tree company out of North Carolina. They have 14 locations where they bring fresh Christmas trees down to Florida. And so we introduced online ordering of your tree, where it could be delivered or you could pick it up with curbside, and their secret shoppers would actually select the tree for you. And in their 30-year history, it was their highest revenue year ever. So, it was just being, communicating what your policies are, to, looking at what are the barriers, what is keeping people, what could potentially keep people from coming into your business or buying your products. And a lot of that is just logic and being open and listening to, people's concerns, what they're talking about online, what they're covering in the media, what they're talking about with each other, and really trying to put together a strategy that makes them comfortable, addresses, if you don't communicate, then you make people uncomfortable, and you're not going to be able to rebuild and grow and be profitable ever in any business.
Yeah, so people having record months, having been forced to sort of make these changes, do you think it's the case that they could have made that decision and prehabbed their business 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and instead of just waiting until they had to, they could have been having record months 5 years ago if they just made the choice to dive in and do all of the stuff that you've just said, communicating through social media. Do you think that's the case?
And
That
it's
they could have avoided?
Well, it's interesting. They absolutely could. I mean, I'm in a hurricane zone, living here in Florida, so we do experience catastrophes with shutdowns that sometimes last only a couple days. Other times, I've been without electricity for 10 days, for example, and so you have to adapt. So, we deal a little bit with single or smaller businesses. More of our clients are regional or national, on a small scale national, that is. However, with our businesses within the region, that's something that, you should always be prepared for the unexpected. You just never know. And so anytime I coach clients, I try to tell them to make the most of every introduction, every business transaction that, where someone can refer someone else as a customer. You can get their text, their mobile number, their email, their address, their input, give them a chance to, have a two-way conversation with you. You'll build more loyalty that way.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to the fact that it's still a human to human endeavor, right? Marketing, business, it always comes back to, I'm a human, you're a human. We have human needs and we have human emotions and all this stuff that can be easy to gloss over from business perspective, but it always comes back to humans dealing with humans. And the more you can just have that genuine care, that genuine understanding in the long term, that tends to create more sustainable business, more sustainable revenues, all that kind of good thing. I guess more playing the long game, right? Being set for the long game, is saying, understanding the environment that you're in, being adaptable, being agile, understanding that if you're in a hurricane zone, you better be prepared for a few days without electricity, and having that willingness to set yourself up,
absolutely,
to sort of be at least resilient to that stuff, so you can bounce back.
One thing we did is I invested in a 3D virtual camera. Definitely,
cool.
I saw obviously other areas of the United States were shut down for a long time. Those are areas that over history often relocate here, visit here, and so forth. And already through one of our clients that is both in the commercial and residential side of real estate, we were able to see the trends. We created what was called a Find Your Florida campaign targeting the Northeast. And with that, we shot virtual tours of numerous properties, and it is almost mind-blowing. And I'm not kidding, almost mind-blowing how many people buy, lease, commercial, rent, or residential space, make investments just based off virtual tours, and the results are staggering. I'm really happy I invested in the camera.
Yeah, and that, I guess that's that adaptability, that foresight, right? You're sort of seeing what's coming next and being on the tip of that iceberg and the tip of that trend. But that's that entire virtual reality, online community, online virtual spaces is a massive, something like an $85 billion industry over the next decade or so. That's a very, very interesting space.
Absolutely. And we do something a little bit unique for certain types of businesses with it, where I've done it. We've done it in fitness studios as well as boutique hotels, where we actually are in the video. So when we are shooting, we have different models. Sometimes we ourselves will insert ourselves in the video, and you have to freeze while it's shooting. And so literally, when you take the virtual tour of, for example, our extended stay hotel, you will see us drinking wine in the kitchen, lounging in the living room, and so forth. And it helps see the space to scale a little bit. And then a fitness studio, we did the same thing to give people a better understanding of how it was restructured for more space and safety, and the quality and the uniqueness of the equipment and so forth. It's called Eat the Frog Fitness. And so These poor people had to freeze in their fitness pose for so long while we shot the video, but it's performing amazingly well for them.
Yeah, well, yeah, you wouldn't want to be the one who got stuck doing a plank for the 5 minutes of the shoot.
I warned them ahead of time to choose something that they could hold for about 5 minutes. Not all heeded my warning.
Yeah, definitely avoid planking in that situation. Go with something light.
True.
But I think that's really, really interesting. And again, it's something that's so unique that sort of sprung up from people literally being shut in their houses for weeks on end and not having access to the outdoors. If you can somehow bring that reality in through a virtual reality, it's super weird, but it's very, very interesting that people can get some of that same sort of sense of awe and reality from a virtual environment. I think particularly when you've got when you're really immersed with the headset, with the VR headset and all that kind of thing, it's a very interesting experience, and it's certainly something that's only going to be more and more and more of that kind of stuff coming through.
Definitely.
Wow, interesting stuff. You look like you're doing a whole bunch of range of really cool stuff. If people want to find out more about you, Sharon, and get connected with you, find out how you work with clients, get engaged with you, where's the best places for them to come and find you?
Find me at intotheblueagency.com, or I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn, especially. Love networking and collaborating with people. So I look forward to connecting with more agency owners and business owners out there.
Amazing. Now, as always, we'll drop those links in the show notes and wherever this episode is posted, so you can just smash one of those and go get connected with Sharon and go check her out in some of the virtual reality fitness gyms and hotels that she's guesting in.
Yeah, you'll see us in the videos. So anyway, well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for dropping by. Really insightful stuff. I think there's a lot of things there for people to get into. Love what you're doing. Thank you so much for dropping by. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.